Sveiki, ar žinojote, kad katei daugiau šansų išgyventi, jeigu jie iškristų iš 32, o ne pavyzdžiui 5 aukšto? Arba ar esate pagalvoję, kas būtų, jei kristumėte į giliausią duobę žemėje? Arba ar girdėjote, kad yra 50% šansas, kad mes visi gyvename kompiuterinėje simuliacijoje? Dr Karl arba daktaras Karlas atsakymams net į pačius netikėčiausius ir komiškiausius klausimus paskyrė 40 savo karjeros metų, o jo vizitinė kortelė yra gyvos klausimų atsakymų apie mokslą laidos. Taigi šiandien pirmą kartą tai pabandysime padaryti ir Lietuvoje su Dr Karl, kuris prisijungs tiesiogiai iš Australijos. Labai raginu visos laidos metu Delfi Facebooko paskyroje siųsti savo arba savo vaikų klausimus. Galite klausti, ko tik norite, ir taip pat tai galite daryti ir lietuviškai, aš pasistengsiu tai išversti į anglų kalbą. O dabar pristatau Dr Karl. Hello and welcome to Vilnius.
This is my very first time in Vilnius. Thank you for the honor. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe let's begin with the questions, right? I've mentioned in the introduction that there's a 50-50 chance that we are all living in a computer simulation. How is that possible, and how would we know that?
The history of this goes back to Plato and even earlier, when people wondered if reality was real or we were just simply seeing shadows on the inside of a cave from a fire behind us. And then Bertrand Russell, the physicist, mathematician and philosopher, asked this question. If, he said, I had been brought into existence 1 second ago with all of my memories, and my brain was living in a bin, in a bucket of water, and I was being fed with electricity, and all my memories were created thinking that there was a past, would I be able to tell the difference between that and reality? And the answer is no. Then in the year 2003, Nick Bostrom, B-O-S-T-R-O-M, wrote a paper about this. You can download it for free, about the simulation. And he said, from a philosophical point of view, that there is a very good argument for believing that people have gone past us, our ancestors have gone on, our descendants rather, have gone on into the future, and they have created machines to go back and recreate the past, and we could be in that past, and there's no way that we could not know that that was true. Then the physicists got involved and said, no, you need a computer bigger than the universe. And then other physicists said, well, if you want to broadcast reality, you don't have to broadcast all of it. So if you're looking at a wall, you don't have to see what's on the other side, just the wall. So there is a small chance, in fact, that we are living in a matrix, a computer simulation. But the point is, it wouldn't change what we do in any way. So that's the difference between philosophy and physics. Thinking about what could be and thinking what you can do with what you've got.
That's super interesting. And we have a question sent in for you. How, or actually, in fact, can you measure the speed and the location of an electron at the same time?
That goes back to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And he was, in the early 1900s, one of the very many clever physicists involved with quantum mechanics. And he said, you can know the position of the electron. You can know the momentum of the electron, exactly, in each case. But you cannot know both at the same time. Now, here's the important thing. This is not because of our inadequate measuring equipment. No, it is inherent. It is a fuzziness, a vagueness built into the fabric of the universe. It is fundamental to the universe that there is a fuzziness. And from this fuzziness, the fact that you cannot know this or that exactly at the same time, you can't know both, comes semiconductors. Think about it. A semiconductor. Sometimes it conducts electricity, sometimes it doesn't. How can it do that? Because of quantum mechanics. If you have a box that is totally empty, no atoms, no molecules, no electromagnetic fields, is anything going to happen in that box? Yes. It's called the Casimir effect, Casimir. And Casimir was a very clever physicist. He helped invent the audio cassette and also the CD. And the reason that he made the CD just a little bit bigger than the audio cassette was so that a thief in a shop could not put it into their shirt pocket. Very clever man. And he said, suppose you've got completely empty space. Does it stay empty? No. Out of nothing will come something, a particle and an antiparticle, and they will wink into existence and then combine and then wink away again. And it happens. We've measured it. The Casimir effect is real. You can have something coming from nothing, providing that it happens for a short enough period of time. It's a little bit like the teenage children being very naughty and borrowing the parents' car on a Saturday night when the parents are asleep. And if they get the car back soon enough before the parents wake up, it never happened. Quantum mechanics is essential to our universe, and it hurts my head.
And we have another question. I'm just going to say in Lithuanian, kad raginu visus dar kartą siųsti savo ir savo vaikų klausimus ir tiesiog pasinaudoti šitą progą. And Karl, there's a question for you. How fast should we throw a basketball in order for it to leave Earth?
Okay, I'm going to say something very clever that I did not make up. I stole it from somebody else. Okay. Randall Munro, who does the XKCD webpage. Yes. That's X for X-ray, K for kilo, C for Charlie, D for Delta. Yes. And he said something very clever. It's easy to get into space, but it's hard to stay there. So if you've got a small rocket, you can go up and then you will immediately come down again. Maybe take you half an hour, you're going to start falling. But if you want to stay up there, you've got to go up into space and then burn a whole lot of fuel to give you a velocity of about 7 kilometres per second or 28,000 kilometres per hour. And that's what happens in the International Space Station. Mm-hmm. In the International Space Station, at a height of 400 kilometres up, the people are experiencing a gravity of roughly 90% of what you and I experience on the ground. Mm-hmm. And yet they float. Why do they float? Because they're always falling. So, in 1 second, they fall down 4.5 metres, and in 1 second, they go horizontally 7 kilometres, and in 7 kilometres, the Earth curves by 4.5 metres. Mm-hmm. So they're always falling, and the ground is always falling away from them. So 7 kilometres per second will put you in an orbit around the Earth, but to escape the Earth's gravitational field forever is about 11 kilometres per second, with the starting velocity from the ground, from the North Pole, with no atmosphere, going straight up. It's called escape velocity.
Mm-hmm. And there's more questions from kids. How much water would we need to put out the sun?
The sun weighs roughly 10 to the 33 kilograms. 1 followed by 33 zeros of kilograms. That is a lot of water. The entire mass of the Earth is 6 followed by 24 zeros in kilograms. So even the mass of the Earth is 1 billion times less than the mass of the sun. Now, the sun does not burn by normal chemical burning, which water can put out, but by nuclear burning. Chemical burning, you've got an atom, and they exchange electrons. Nuclear burning, the nucleus either splits into two, or you have two small nuclei, like two hydrogens, come together. Every second, the sun burns 620 million tonnes of hydrogen. Not 620 tonnes, 620 million tonnes. And turns it into 616 million tonnes of helium, and there's 4 million tonnes missing. One turns into the solar wind, charged particles coming out of the sun at 1 million tonnes per second. And that missing 3 million tonnes gets turned into energy, following Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. And that's roughly, in all directions, 1 followed by 26 zeros of watts. Watt is how you measure power, W-A-T-T. So you'd have to cool the sun down, and I think you'd probably need maybe 10 to the 37 kilograms, 1 followed by 37 zeros. That's a lot of water, much more than the entire mass of the Earth.
It's difficult to imagine these numbers. And one more question from kids. Why mango fruits are yellow?
There are 12 causes of colour. In the case of the mango, it's due to a dye, D-Y-E. And all of the colours of the rainbow, all the way from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, all of them land on the mango and they all get absorbed except for yellow. And yellow gets reflected. Why? Because there's an interaction that happens with electrons. So the electromagnetic radiation, which is what light is, lands on the mango, and red and orange and green and blue and indigo and violet are all absorbed, but yellow is not. It's reflected. Why? You have to look at the chemicals, and then you look at the outer electron shells of the molecule, and then from that you can work out the colour. I don't know that specific pathway. It's probably a few hours' work if you're doing third year physics at university.
Thank you. And another question, it's a little bit personal. What planet or moon would you like to stand on and contemplate, and why?
Well, obviously, planet 18421, which is planet Kruszelnicki. It's my planet.
Favorite planet, yeah.
No, it's my planet. It's named after me. 18421. Look it up on the NASA homepage, or 18412, I think it is, 18412, and that's my planet. And it was named after me by an astronomer, Rob McNaught, who discovered that huge comet McNaught that came past the Earth about 10 years ago. Did you see that Comet McNaught, about 10 years ago?
No, we were not able to see that with the naked eye, unfortunately, in Vilnius, no.
In the southern hemisphere, it filled the sky like that. Wow. And you could see it every sunset. It was beautiful. So where would I like to be, besides my own planet, 18412, anywhere that's not Earth? I actually applied to NASA in 1980 to become an astronaut. And I wrote them a letter saying, hey, I've already got a degree in physics and maths, and I've already got a degree in engineering, when I designed and built a machine to pick up electrical signals off the human eyeball to diagnose certain types of disease. And right now, I'm studying medicine and surgery. Can I be an astronaut? Yours truly, Karl. Mm-hmm. And they sent me a letter back saying, no, we're all full up. Number 2, we only employ Americans. And I've still got that letter. And it was typed on a typewriter and signed by a human being with a ballpoint pen. So I failed in my attempt to become an astronaut and go to another planet.
Well, maybe next time. And regarding contemplating, why do we and you sometimes find yourself staring fixedly into the distance?
This is a real problem for pilots, because if they're looking in front of them and there's nothing to focus on, their vision will automatically focus about 3 or 4 meters away from them. Now, this can be very dangerous. Imagine that there's an aeroplane coming straight at you, and it's a tiny little black dot, and if you focused on it with your eyes, and so the lens inside your eyes changes shape. So at the front of your eye, you've got a thing called the cornea, a curved thing, and then inside you've got a lens which will change shape. And when you're born, it can vary focus from about 2 to 15 diopters. I used a word there, diopter. You measure height in meters and weight in kilograms, and you measure the strength or bending power of a lens in diopters. So when you're born, you can adjust from 2 to 15 diopters, and the lens keeps on making cells all the time, and it becomes stiffer. And by the time you're about 40, you can only adjust it over 2 diopters, and by the time you're 70, 1. And so if you're lucky, one eye at birth would focus far away and the other close, so that way you can see both. But anyway, if you are focusing with the lens in your eye adjusting on a little dot way off in a distance, you can see it as a little dot. But if the dot is coming towards you but you're focusing on something nearby, instead of a small black dot, you'll see a large, fuzzy, slightly dark thing, and you probably won't notice it. So this is because when you're the staring fixedly into the distance is because you will, when there's nothing to see, just focus about 2 meters away, and then sometimes your brain goes into a space and you think, I'm staring at the ground and I don't know why, but I'm liking it, and that's in the field of psychology, and that's much harder. Anything to do with the brain is harder.
Mm-hmm. And our mutual friend on Facebook, Asta, just said that she had the privilege to meet you in person, and she's sending you greetings. So that's not a question, but just a greeting. And regarding the questions, I have more questions from kids. Does the universe have the edge, like the ending? Does the universe end anywhere?
This answer bothers me and it hurts my head. However, it's what the clever people in physics say is the situation. Number one, the universe had a definite beginning 13.8 billion years ago. Number two, it's infinite. It goes everywhere. It reaches to the end of everything. It is everything. This is what hurts my head. How can something that began at a certain time be infinite? I think I have to study cosmology and astrophysics to really understand, but as I do with any specific field of knowledge, I just simply go along and agree with whatever is the overwhelming professional opinion in that field, whether it's geology, metallurgy, climatology, or in this case, astrophysics.
So spiders. A lot of people are scared, afraid, and even disgusted by spiders. And Australia is kind of famous for having really bizarre and gigantic spiders. What would happen if suddenly we wake up one day and realize that all of the spiders on Earth have disappeared?
If the spiders leave us, if there were no spiders, within a few months, all of our agricultural crops would be eaten by insects, and there would be massive starvation. The spiders are our friends. I personally am an arachnophobe, a fancy word meaning scared of spiders. I've been working on this for quite a time, and I have finally got to the stage where I have bought some books of spiders, and I can open the books and put my hand on a photograph of a spider and only be slightly terrified. But even though I am terrified of them, I love them because they mean that we still have agricultural crops to feed you and me.
So we have almost 5 minutes left for us to talk. Aš dar kartą siūlau visiems klausti Dr. Karl, kol galite ir tai padaryti gyvai ir dabar. And I have another question for you. So we found a new bird that has both genders in one bird. How is that possible, and what kind of a bird is it?
It's a very weird situation. Firstly, thinking that there's just male and female, too complicated. It's much more complicated than that. Let me tell you a story with a human and then go to the bird. A 52-year-old woman needed a kidney transplant in America, in Boston. And of course, you go to the family and say, well, let's just check out the DNA and see who is the closest match for the kidney transplant. And guess what? She was not related to 2 of her 3 children. She was related to one son, but the other son did not carry her DNA, even though all of her children, this is 15, 20 years ago, were fertilized naturally with her eggs, with her husband. There was no exchange in hospital. So have you got me so far that the woman was not related to 2 of her children?
Yes.
You with that so far?
Yes.
Okay, now, what happened was that her mother, when she, from her ovaries, once a month, popped out an egg, on one occasion had 2 eggs. This happens, and it leads to non-identical twins. So here's one egg, here's the other egg. The sperm came along and fertilized the eggs, and normally they grow separately, bigger and bigger, to make 2 separate twins. But what happened in this case, and this is very rare, only a few cases on record, the 2 eggs fused to make 1 egg. And that was her sister.
Wow.
So she is what we call a chimera. So the 2 eggs fused into one single egg. And so some of the cells in her organs have her DNA, and a cell right next to it can have the DNA of her sister. Mind you, all of her blood cells, her white blood cells, are entirely hers. But the thyroid, the skin, and the ovary was made half of her DNA, half the cells had her DNA, and the other half had her sister's DNA. Mm-hmm. So with regard to this very rare bird, it's happened maybe 10 times, we've seen this happen in history, was that there was an egg with 2 nuclei. Normally, the female makes an egg and there's just one little nucleus inside it. But in this case, there were 2, one here and one there. And the sperm fertilized both of them. And then if you go down the pathway of how a bird has an egg, then it's split into 2 cells, 4, 8, and made a bird. And one half of the body is entirely male and the other half is female. The right side is male, and it has a small testis. And the left side has an ovary. Now, this is interesting. Birds normally have only one working ovary, which is on the left. So the question is, can this bird, which is male on the right and has the feathers and the DNA and all the XY type stuff on the right, and is female on the left, can this have a baby? We were looking. We don't know. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it is amazing. And we have one last question from the audience. Mantas is asking, how much does a spoon of a black hole weigh?
Okay. Firstly, all black holes have the same size. It doesn't matter if they're 10 times the mass of our sun, or 1 million or 1 billion. The size of all black holes is 0. And secondly, they have mass, which varies. So when you say to get a spoonful of a black hole, there's nothing to pick up in the spoon. There's no volume. You see, a black hole has only 3 properties. It has mass, it has spin, and it has charge. Volume or size is not a property of a black hole in exactly the same way that I personally do not have the property of being the world heavyweight boxing champion and world cage fighting champion mixed martial arts. That is not one of my properties, and in the same way, a black hole does not have the property of having any volume. So you can't talk about it having any size. It doesn't have size. But our children will be able to use and they'll be able to make and use black holes. Isn't that amazing to think?
Wow, it is amazing. And Mantas is asking another question. What is the relationship between black hole singularity and its event horizon?
The black hole itself is where all the matter is concentrated, and it has no size, and it can weigh up to billions of times the mass of our sun. Around that is an area called an artificial membrane in space called the event horizon. And for our sun, if our sun were magically turned into a black hole, it would be about 3 kilometres radius. And it's a linear relationship. If you double or triple the mass, then the event horizons doubles or triples. It's quite a straightforward linear relationship. And around that, and the event horizon is defined as being that place where the escape velocity is equal to the speed of light. And watch the YouTube video by Veritasium or Derek Muller, which explains the first photograph of the light around a black hole. It runs for 10 minutes. I had to watch it 5 times before I began to understand it. By the 7th time, I began to understand it. Derek Muller, Veritasium, you'll learn a lot from that YouTube video.
Thank you, and I promise really the last question, your answers are so interesting, we can't stop. So is that true that thunderstorms cause more asthma?
Yes, they cause a release in pollen of a very small size. So the pollen breaks up into smaller particles, which then go into the lungs. Asthma is a serious disease. In fact, it is not one disease, it is at least 15 different diseases, which all have the same outcome in that you can't breathe out. And that's why you need 15 different treatments. Asthma is a symptom, like fever is a symptom, it's not a disease. You can have a fever from hepatitis or pneumonia. So in the same way, you can have difficulty in breathing from a whole bunch of different diseases. And it's due to the pollen being broken into smaller particles and penetrating deep into the lungs. And in some cases, people who have never had asthma have it. In Australia, about 1,000 people die every year from asthma. When I was a doctor in a children's hospital, it was a terrible disease to deal with. And sometimes you can't do a single thing, but mostly you can. And in the case of Australia, where you've got 1,000 people dying every year, some of them are healthy people, young people, aged 15 to 25. So if you've got asthma, treat it seriously.
Okay, Karl, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed your short stay in Vilnius.
Yes, and one more thing. In 5 3/4 hours from now, an American spacecraft will attempt to land on an asteroid called Bennu. Go to the NASA homepage and you'll be able to see it live, minus 20 minutes late.
Okay, thank you, Karl, again. Ir ačiū visiems, kad žiūrėjote, ačiū, kad siuntėte klausimus. Manau, tai nebuvo paskutinis kartas, kai Dr. Karl paskambinom iš Vilniaus tiesiai į Australiją. Ačiū ir iki.